The warning signs are already there. The headlines just haven't caught up yet. Everyone is talking about the favorites, the rankings, the superstar players, the betting odds, the predictions. But World Cups have a strange habit of exposing problems that nobody wanted to see. And right now, some of the teams being treated as future champions may actually be carrying the biggest risks into the tournament, because being the favorite sounds like an advantage, until it isn't. And two countries in particular might be discovering that the pressure of being expected to win can become more dangerous than the opponent standing across from them. Take Portugal. On paper, everything looks perfect. Elite talent, big names, massive expectations, a squad filled with players competing at the highest level of club football, the kind of team that analysts love to place near the top of every prediction list. But that's exactly where the problem begins, because when a team is expected to dominate, every match becomes a test they are supposed to pass. Not a challenge, not a battle, a requirement, and requirements create pressure. Against a team like DR Congo, the football world doesn't ask whether Portugal can win, it asks by how much. That's a completely different psychological environment. If Portugal wins comfortably, people shrug and move on. That's what was supposed to happen. But if the game stays close, if Portugal struggles, if they look nervous, suddenly the conversation changes completely. Now every missed chance becomes evidence of weakness. Every defensive mistake becomes a warning sign. Every uncomfortable moment becomes a headline. And that's what makes these games dangerous. Not because the underdog is necessarily stronger, because the favorite is carrying all the consequences. DR Congo enters that kind of match with freedom. Portugal enters with fear. Fear of embarrassment, fear of criticism, fear of becoming the story. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. History has shown this repeatedly. Teams don't usually collapse because they forgot how to play football. They collapse because expectations start affecting decisions. Players become cautious, managers become conservative, simple passes become complicated. The pressure doesn't just exist outside the stadium. Eventually it enters the stadium. Eventually it enters the dressing room. Eventually it enters the minds of the players. And that's when things start getting interesting, because Portugal isn't the only team facing this problem. England might be dealing with something even more dangerous. At first glance, England looks like one of the strongest squads in international football. The talent is undeniable. Position by position, few teams can match the depth. The names are familiar. The highlights are impressive. The confidence appears real. But there's a question that keeps resurfacing every time a major tournament arrives. What happens when talent isn't enough? Tournament football has always been different. The games are tighter. The margins are smaller. The pressure is higher. And most importantly, the tactical battles become more important than individual brilliance. That's where England's story starts becoming uncomfortable, because some opponents seem perfectly designed to expose exactly those weaknesses. Croatia is one of them. This isn't speculation. We've seen versions of this story before. England enters with momentum and excitement. Croatia enters with experience and patience. England wants to control the game. Croatia wants to control the moments. And in tournament football, moments often matter more. That's what makes Croatia such a dangerous opponent. They rarely panic. They rarely rush. They rarely give games away. When matches become tense, they seem to get stronger. When matches become chaotic, they seem to get calmer. And that's not an easy problem to solve, because England's confidence may be built on talent advantages that disappear once the game becomes a psychological contest, once the match turns into a chess game, once emotions start influencing decisions, once every mistake carries massive consequences. Suddenly the difference between favorite and underdog starts shrinking, and that's happening more often than many people realize. In fact, it points toward a much larger issue affecting international football. The underdogs aren't behaving like underdogs anymore. That might be the biggest change in the modern game. Years ago, many smaller nations entered tournaments hoping to compete. Today they enter expecting to compete. That sounds like a small difference. It's not. It's enormous. Belief changes everything. Teams that expect to lose play differently. Teams that believe they belong play differently too. The old intimidation factor isn't what it used to be. The giant names still exist. The famous jerseys still exist. The history still exists. But fear is disappearing. And when fear disappears, favorites become vulnerable. Look around international football. The tactical organization is improving everywhere. Coaching standards are improving everywhere. Player development is improving everywhere. everywhere. Information is everywhere. Video analysis is everywhere. Preparation is better than ever. The gap between elite nations and everyone else hasn't vanished, but it has narrowed. And that narrowing creates chaos because favorites are still carrying expectations built for a different era, an era where reputations won matches before kickoff. That era is fading fast. Teams like Croatia no longer see themselves as outsiders. Teams like Colombia no longer walk onto the field feeling inferior. Teams like DR Congo can look at major football powers and genuinely believe they can compete. That belief changes the entire dynamic of a tournament. Suddenly, the favorite isn't facing a team hoping for a miracle. They're facing a team expecting an opportunity, and opportunities are much more dangerous. The response from supporters only adds another layer. Fans of major nations often assume pressure is motivation. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes pressure becomes a burden, and when results don't immediately match expectations, the scrutiny becomes relentless. Every substitution is questioned. Every tactical decision is debated. Every performance is analyzed frame by frame. The noise becomes impossible to ignore. That's especially true when a nation has spent years hearing that this could finally be their moment. Because expectations grow, then they grow again, then they grow even more. Eventually, they become impossible to satisfy. Even victories can create criticism. Think about how strange that sounds. A team wins. People complain anyway. Not convincing enough, not dominant enough, not impressive enough. That's the environment some favorites are walking into, and once that cycle begins, trust starts eroding. Fans become nervous. Media becomes skeptical. Players become cautious. The pressure multiplies. What's fascinating is that there is a reasonable counter-argument. Great teams are favorites for a reason. Talent matters, depth matters, experience matters. The strongest squads usually reach the later stages of tournaments. That's true. Nobody is arguing otherwise. Portugal and England absolutely possess the quality needed to compete for the biggest prize. The problem is that quality alone doesn't eliminate pressure. In some cases, it increases it. The better your squad looks, the less room you have for mistakes. The more people expect, the more people demand, the more dangerous every unexpected result becomes. That's why this controversy remains unresolved, because nobody knows whether these expectations will create motivation or paralysis. Nobody knows whether pressure will sharpen these teams or break them. Nobody knows whether the favorites are actually stronger than everyone believes or far more fragile than anyone realizes. And that's the hidden story developing beneath all the predictions. The biggest threat facing some World Cup favorites may not be tactical. It may not be technical. It may not even be the opponent standing across from them. It may be the weight they are carrying before the tournament even begins. The weight of expectation. The weight of history, the weight of being told they should win, because football has a habit of punishing assumptions, and every World Cup reminds us of the same uncomfortable truth. The moment a team starts believing it only has to show up to win is usually the moment the real danger begins. So when the tournament finally arrives, don't just watch the underdogs. Watch the favorites. Watch how they react when things get difficult. Watch how they respond when the pressure rises. Watch what happens when expectations collide with reality, because Portugal and England may have enough talent to win everything, but if history tells us anything, talent is rarely the whole story, and sometimes the biggest problem is the one nobody sees until it's already too late.